Greetings, everybody. Welcome back. Episode number 3 of this tutorial where we are talking about suspense and lazy in React. So in the last episode, final episode, episode number 3, I want to add, the concept of error boundaries to our application. I'm going to tell you this upfront. If you do not know anything about error boundaries, there is another dedicated playlist on my channel about error boundaries. So you can watch that video, that playlist to, learn all there is to learn about error boundaries. But basically, error boundaries help you to keep your application functional uh, in the event of a failure. So when a failure occurs, for example, you want to get some data from a backend API, but your application, encounters some problem. Instead of crashing the whole application, you can show a fallback UI to the user, telling them that there is some problem and for example, the application can't fetch data, but the application doesn't crash. So this keeps your application very user-friendly. It's a technique that you can use in React applications, and as I told you, I have dedicated a full playlist to the concept and topic of error boundaries. But in this episode, the last episode of this tutorial, I want to add error boundaries to the mix, to what we have developed so far, to see how we can combine error boundaries, suspense, and lazy with a backend API. So let's get to this. What is an error boundary? Let me zoom in a little bit. As I told you, a React component, error boundary is a class component, is a React component that catches JavaScript errors anywhere in its child component tree. So you are going to wrap the components that have the potential to encounter some, issues with your error boundary component. So your error boundary component is a component that wraps some other child components, and these error boundary components are capable of catching any errors inside of those child components. And then they display a fallback UI instead of, a broken component or crashing the application. You can also log errors for debugging. This is again something that I have covered in that other playlist I told you about. And they work with class components. As of now, functional components can't be error boundaries directly. Now, what we want to do is to create an error boundary component. So an error boundary component is a class component. As you can see here, I have talked about this in that other playlist. It's a class component. It is extending, React.component. It has this constructor. It has this static get derived state from, error. And it has this lifecycle, lifecycle method called component did catch. And then of course it has, this render. So inside of this render, you are, using this has error is here. Take a look here. So in the constructor, you are creating some initial state. And then when you're rendering the component, you are checking this initial state. If there is an error, you can, render your custom, let's say, fallback UI. Otherwise, you're going to render the children of this error boundary component. This.props.children. And as you can see here, this is the fallback UI. So we are saying that, something bad happened and we're not able to, for example, do something. We're not able to, fetch the data. And then of course you can access the error info and component stack and do all sorts of things. If you want to dive deep into the concept of error boundaries, I highly recommend checking out that playlist I told you about. And using these two, you can do, for example, some logging to some service. I don't want to, discuss error boundaries in detail here because I know that there is another dedicated playlist for, error boundaries, and I, highly recommend watching that playlist as well. So we're going to create this. We're going to create this error boundary component inside of our application. I am on a new branch. Inside of the components, I'm going to create this error boundary.jsx. I am going to write the code for this error boundary component. It's going to be a class component. Inside the constructor, we are going to create a kind of an initial state, and then the get derived state from error. We are going to set the has error to true, and we're going to set the error to the parameter we receive. Then the lifecycle method to do some logging if we want. We're going to simply console log something and update the state, and then render. If there is an error, let's render our fallback UI to say the user that we encountered some issue and we're not able to render what we want to render, right? And we can also give the user the opportunity to retry. This is again something that I have talked about in that other playlist, retrying a failed scenario. Otherwise, we're going to simply return the props, the children of this error boundary component. So this is the error boundary component right now. The next step is to start using it. So inside of our app.jsx, as you can see, we are going to import error boundary. We are going to import the home page as before. We're going to create a lazy version of book page. And then take a look here. We are going to wrap the suspense with error boundary. So with suspense, what we can do is to, show the user this template when we are in the middle of loading some data. And with error boundary here, we can show the user a fallback UI whenever an error happens. When we are communicating with that backend API, if there is an error, we can show the user that custom fallback UI. So this fallback UI, right? So inside of the, app.jsx, what I am going to do is to get rid of this code and write the new version. The new version not only takes advantage of lazy and suspense, but also of the error boundary component we created. Let's import the home page. Let's import the error boundary component. Let's create a lazy version of book page. Let's create the app component itself. Let's write the template, the link to the home page, and then the error boundary, and then the suspense as before with the fallback UI, the routes for home page, and book page, which is using the book details component. And that's it. We're done with the app component. The app component is not only using suspense, as you can see here, but it is also using error boundary. Now, testing the error boundary. Now, the idea is, right now, everything is working without any issues. So you've got your, home page, you've got your book list, and then when you click here, you will see the details of that book on the other page, book details. So this is the book details page, which is using the book page. This is the book page, which is using the book details component. But the idea is that whenever we click here and we encounter some issues, for example, we can't get the data or the details of a book, we want to show that fallback UI that the error boundary has. So the error boundary had a fallback UI. If there was an error, instead of rendering the author and the year or crashing the application, we are going to render this. Now what we need to do is to temporarily throw an error inside of the book details, because the book details is the component that the book page is using. So the book page is using book details. If we want to simulate an error, we need to throw an error here inside of the book details. Take a look here. So for example, if loading, we're gonna, render this paragraph. And if we cannot find the book, we're gonna render this. But here, let's write this code to see if the application actually shows that, fallback UI provided by the, error boundary component. So here, I am going to write this code real quick. So I'm going to say throw a new error, and the error is going to be what? It's going to be book data missing. And that's it. Now, if you remember, using the error boundary, when there was an error, we console log some message. This is the perfect place to do some logging to an external service for further investigation. But here we're, console logging something. So I can, go to my console and click on one of these. Click on the first one. You see the fallback UI? This is the fallback UI produced by the error boundary. Let's take a look at the error boundary. It says, oops, something went wrong. This is the fallback UI. And then this is the logging that we are doing using the error boundary. Instead of logging to the console, you can of course log to an external service, as I told you, to further investigate the issue. And yeah, that's it. So a combination of error boundaries, suspense, and lazy. Let's get back to the notes. Visit a book page. You should see the friendly error fallback UI instead of a blank screen or crash. There is also the possibility of come up with a specific fallback UIs for specific components, or catch errors only in certain parts. So for example, right now, if you take a look at the application, we are wrapping everything inside of our error boundary. But it is also possible to wrap smaller parts of your tree with error boundaries, like for example, the book details component only. So, to be more granular, you can decide which components have the potential to throw errors and only wrap those with the error boundary. And in this case, for example, I have, decided to take the book page and only wrap the book details component with the error boundary. And of course, using error boundaries, as I told you, it is absolutely possible to come up with different fallback UIs for different components. This is again something that I have covered inside of the other tutorial I told you about. So let's talk about what we've learned in this episode. We talked about error boundaries to catch errors in child components. They're class components with lifecycle method like getDerivedState from error or component did catch. And we are wrapping our lazy loaded routes or critical components that have the potential to throw errors with error boundaries to improve our user experience. Now, if you want to learn more, right? If you want to learn more about error boundaries, as I told you, and build more robust React apps, there is another playlist about error boundaries in React that you can watch. I highly recommend watching that because it will, kind of complete your understanding of error boundaries, and you can even extend this code, the code of this application by developing a specific error boundaries for fallback UIs for different components of the application. So for example, you can come up with a specific fallback UI for the, let's say, book details, and another one for home page, for example. So create custom fallback UIs with retry buttons and better user guidance, right? You can integrate error logging services like Sentry, or like another custom API that you communicate with to log the error. Right now we're logging inside of the console, but there's nothing stopping us from logging to an external source. And you can handle errors not only in UI, but also asynchronous data fetching and event handlers. So yeah, take a look at that playlist. I'm sure that you're gonna love it. And that's it, guys. That's it for this playlist. That is the end of episode 3, the last episode of this series. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. This was like a short tutorial targeted at, let's say, people who have some experience developing React applications. We kind of combined some advanced topics: suspense, lazy, error boundaries, fetching data from the backend API. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If that's the case, as always, I'd really appreciate it if you could, share the video with someone, a friend who's learning React probably, or give it a thumbs up and stay tuned for the upcoming videos as well. Until then, bye-bye.